So right now, your local town might literally be clearing ground for, a billion-dollar state-of-the-art manufacturing plant.
Oh, yeah, you see the construction everywhere.
Right. It looks like this absolute economic boom.
Yeah.
So why are you and your neighbors maxing out 29% APR credit cards just to, buy groceries?
That is the big question right now.
Because, most of the economic updates you get are from people sitting in these high-rise offices looking at spreadsheets that were honestly out of date before they were even printed.
Yeah, totally disconnected.
Exactly. They talk about soft landings and transient metrics while having, catered lunches. But down here at ground level, the economy isn't some PowerPoint presentation. It's a very real, very heavy machine made of steel, sweat, and debt.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is that we are witnessing this phenomenon that economists call the capital employment split. Or, more simply, it's a two-speed economy.
Speed economy, right.
Right. You have these massive, high-altitude capital infrastructure commitments accelerating at just a historic pace. Billions of dollars being deployed. But at the exact same time, ground-level household margins are facing absolute exhaustion.
And that is our exact mission for this deep dive. We're looking at a pretty thick stack of macro and microeconomic intelligence reports today.
We've got a lot to cover.
We really do. We're pulling from the Grok and ChatGPT briefings, plus the Levels report covering mid-July to mid-August 2026. And we're going to trace how these two completely different realities are just violently colliding.
And to do that, we really need to start by looking at the foundation of that collision, which is the American consumer's balance sheet.
Right.
Because to understand the friction happening globally, we first have to understand the sheer financial exhaustion happening locally.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start right in your wallet. Because if all these billions of dollars are supposedly entering the economy, we need to look at how everyday households are actually doing.
Yeah, let's look at the numbers.
So the New York Fed's report from August 11th. Total household debt in the second quarter of 2026 basically paused. It sat at $18.7 trillion.
Which sounds good, right?
Exactly. To a guy in a high-rise, a flat number looks like stabilization.
Yeah.
It looks like, hey, the consumer's finally catching their breath.
But when you look under the hood at the actual composition of that debt, that stabilization just completely falls apart.
Yeah, it's a totally different story.
The total number stayed flat only because mortgage balances actually fell by $74 billion. People are paying down their homes.
Right, which is great, but
look at what stepped in to fill that void. Credit card balances spiked by $21 billion to hit $1.263 trillion, and auto debt jumped up to $1.713 trillion.
this sounds like looking at a household's bank account and declaring that they're financially stable because their total debt didn't grow. But you're completely ignoring the fact that they just paid off a chunk of their low-interest 4% mortgage by basically maxing out their high-interest credit cards just to keep the lights on.
The underlying mechanics of that shift are brutal. The financial margin for the American worker is it's virtually non-existent right now.
Yeah.
And we see the immediate consequence of this in the delinquency rates. The flow of credit card balances into serious delinquency is sitting stubbornly high at 6.97%.
Wow. Almost 7%.
Yeah. And, that isn't evidence of a total 2008-style systemic collapse, but it is absolute proof that consumers are leaning heavily on very expensive revolving debt just to maintain their baseline existence.
And their paychecks aren't really throwing them a life preserver either. Like the sources show, real average hourly earnings actually fell 0.1% in July.
Yeah.
Which puts them down 0.2% year over year.
Yeah.
So nominal wages, the actual dollar amount on your paycheck, those are technically rising. But inflation is just eating those gains alive.
Think of it like trying to walk up a down escalator.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
You're putting in the effort, you're moving your feet faster, taking home more dollars, but the downward pull of embedded costs is stronger than your forward momentum.
Yeah.
Food is up 3%. Electricity is up 4.2%. The July Consumer Price Index was up 3.4% year over year.
It's just constant.
It is. This isn't a temporary pandemic-era supply chain spike anymore. This inflation is now a permanent embedded cost in recurring household expenses.
Which totally explains the breaking point we saw in the July data. Retail and food service sales finally dropped 0.6%. People aren't just, complaining about prices anymore on social media. They are physically pulling back.
Oh, they have to. For months, consumers were just spending through the pain, kind of absorbing those price hikes by putting it on plastic.
Just swiping the card.
Exactly. The retail drop tells us they finally hit the credit limit. The cushion is just gone.
So if you are relying on credit cards to survive, because that downward escalator of inflation is wiping out your wage gains, what is happening to the actual job that is supposed to be paying that debt off? We need to look at the stalling national engine.
Yeah, the labor market data from this reporting period changes the entire narrative of 2026.
It really does.
U.S. non-farm payroll employment, which is basically the core tracker of how many everyday paychecks are actually being cut, excluding farm work, it actually shrank by 23,000 jobs in July.
A shrinking job market is terrifying enough on its own, but the backward-looking data is what really caught my eye.
Oh, the revisions.
Yeah, the reports show that May and June job growth was revised downward by a massive 103,000 combined jobs.
It's a huge miss.
When over 100,000 jobs just vanish from the spreadsheet retroactively, you realize the high-rise perspective has been operating on phantom data for months. The employment machine isn't just slowing down. It has been actively struggling to generate any forward movement since, like the spring.
And the labor force participation rate slipping to 61.4% reinforces that. That's down almost a full point since January.
People are just giving up.
Right. They're dropping out of the search entirely. Unemployment is sitting at 4.1%. But here's the central policy dilemma. Despite a clearly stalling labor market, the Federal Reserve held rates at 3.5 to 3.75% on July 29th.
So what does this all mean for the everyday worker? Because there was a 9-3 split vote at that Fed meeting. 3 members, Hammack, Kashkari, and Logan Fitchu, they actually wanted to raise rates.
Which seems counterintuitive, right?
Totally.
Right.
If employment is shrinking and retail sales are dropping because people are just completely tapped out, why on earth would 3 Fed members vote to make borrowing even more expensive for households that are already drowning in credit card debt?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it really exposes the trap policymakers are caught in.
Okay, how so?
Those 3 Fed members aren't looking at your credit card bill. They're looking at the Producer Price Index or the PPI.
Right.
This measures the wholesale cost of doing business before a product ever reaches the store shelf. And that index remained 4.7% higher than last year. Upstream service costs and final demand construction costs are just still skyrocketing.
Which means the businesses creating the goods are still paying premium prices just to operate in the first place.
Precisely. The Fed cannot offer easy relief to the consumer by cutting rates because inflation at the producer level is still running way too hot.
It's a catch-22.
Exactly. If they cut rates, they risk throwing gasoline on the upstream inflation fire. So households and small businesses are simply caught in the crossfire. They're trapped between a weakening job market that won't give them a raise and borrowing costs that just refuse to come down.
It's rough. And you'd think if the Fed won't rescue them and their shrinking paychecks aren't rescuing them, a region landing $1 billion corporate investment would be the ultimate lifeline.
You would think so.
But when we shift from the national engine to the foothills corridor of North Carolina, we hit this massive contradiction. Why is a region seeing a historic explosion of wealth and physical capital at the exact same time its residents are being squeezed to the absolute limit?
The scale of the capital landing in North Carolina right now is staggering. We are not talking about minor commercial developments. We are talking about landscape-altering capital formation.
Yeah, look at Prysmian's monumental announcement on August 12th. Over $1 billion being invested to expand their operations in Claremont, North Carolina, right in Catawba County.
That's a massive influx of cash.
Right. That single investment is creating 385 jobs. And crucially, the average salaries are projected at $60,870, which is well above the current county average.
We really have to emphasize the physical nature of what Prysmian is doing there, too. They are expanding glass and fiber optic manufacturing. Yeah, they aren't just some software companies setting up a server farm to passively drain the local power grid. They're building the heavy physical production infrastructure required for the global digital economy. They're making the actual cables that make data centers and grid modernization possible.
And it's not an isolated event either. Down in Sanford, Steris announced a $600 million advanced manufacturing and distribution node.
Huge.
Bringing 335 jobs, averaging over $68,000 a year. Then you have Project Arlington. That's an unidentified manufacturer investing $7 million to recycle a legacy textile facility in Burke County for 64 new jobs.
Which is a massive win for reusing existing infrastructure instead of paving over greenfields.
Exactly. You even have Alexander County utilizing a $50,000 state grant to prep 115 acres of raw land for future industrial sites.
It's a true multi-sector boom. Fiber optics, life sciences, advanced logistics, even Microsoft is in the mix. And notably, they're foregoing local economic investment incentives for its data centers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which signals that big tech might finally have to stand on its own economics rather than relying on taxpayer subsidies to set up shop.
But here's where it gets really interesting, though. We have billions of dollars hitting the ground. We have hundreds of high-paying jobs being announced. But the labor pool in the Hickory and Catawba metro area is actually shrinking.
It's the two-speed economy in action.
Right. The reports show the metro labor force fell to 163,300 in June, with overall employment declining. So if Prysmian and Steris are dropping over 1.6 billion and need hundreds of highly skilled workers for advanced manufacturing, where are these workers supposed to come from if local labor participation is actively dropping?
This raises an important question, and it illustrates the exact danger of that two-speed economy. If you just look at North Carolina's headline unemployment rate, it sits at a very healthy 3.6%.
That sounds great.
It looks fantastic on a spreadsheet, but that low percentage masks a really troubling mechanical reality. The state actually lost 12,684 employed residents in June alone.
Wait, how can unemployment be that low if the state is actively losing thousands of employed workers?
Because the denominator is shrinking, people are simply leaving the workforce entirely, so they are no longer counted as unemployed.
Oh, I see.
The capital is landing, the billions are clearing the bank, but the human momentum is lagging far behind. The workforce just isn't expanding or upskilling fast enough to meet the capital.
So we have billion-dollar factories being built on one side of the street and households putting groceries on a 29% APR credit card on the other side, with a shrinking pool of workers unable to bridge the gap.
That's the reality.
What is the friction preventing that massive corporate wealth from immediately translating into relief for the household?
The friction really comes down to infrastructure, energy, and global geopolitics. These local factories in North Carolina, they don't exist in a vacuum. They are deeply tethered to global choke points.
Right.
And those choke points are currently acting as a massive tax on the local economy.
Which brings us to the biggest mechanical choke point right now, the Strait of Hormuz.
Exactly.
The International Energy Agency's August assessment made it very clear that Middle East tensions are just dominating the world energy outlook. Global oil supply is currently 6.3 million barrels per day below last year's levels.
It's a huge deficit.
And on top of that, damage to Qatar's LNG infrastructure means an estimated 140 billion cubic meters of lost liquid natural gas supply between 2026 and 2030.
For anyone wondering why a lost gas supply in Qatar matters to someone driving to work in Catawba County, it's because energy disruption isn't just a ticker symbol on a trading floor, it is deeply mechanical.
It trickles down to everything.
Hydrocarbons feed into transportation, plastics, chemicals, manufacturing inputs, freight, and ultimately the price of the food at the grocery store. When energy gets choked globally, every single local process gets more expensive.
And the AI offset in the WTO report is a perfect example of how weird this global dynamic has become.
Oh, this part is fascinating.
Right. The World Trade Organization reported that global merchandise trade actually grew 3.2% year over year. But it didn't grow because the traditional economy is booming. It grew largely because the dollar value of AI-enabling goods skyrocketed by more than 40%.
Yeah, the tech boom is masking the pain.
Exactly. This explosion in tech hardware essentially masked the shock from the Middle East war on the global balance sheet.
The global economy is literally splitting in two. You have these high-end advanced sectors being rapidly accelerated by this massive AI capital cycle, and then you have traditional sectors and everyday households absorbing the brutal compounding costs of energy disruption.
It's like the global economy has this massive billion-dollar AI turbocharger bolted onto the engine, but the actual fuel line coming from the Middle East is pinched.
That's a great analogy.
Thanks. And everyday commuters are the ones stuck paying the mechanic's bill at the pump.
And that mechanic's bill has a name. It's a logistics tax, and it disproportionately punishes the rural worker. The AI boom might look great on national GDP reports, but the logistics tax is what actually hits the wallet.
Let's look at that local impact. North Carolina regular gas hit $3.71 a gallon in mid-August. That's hovering just below the U.S. average of 4.07.
Right.
If you are a rural worker commuting long distances from Burke, Caldwell, Wilkes, or McDowell counties to get to these new manufacturing jobs, that price at the pump is a persistent daily drain on an already exhausted financial margin.
And energy costs aren't just confined to the gas tank either. It's hitting the electricity for the home. We are entering an era of what we can call grid wars.
Grid wars, I like that.
Duke Energy Progress is currently proposing rate settlements that would raise residential rates by about 6.8% over 2 years, while Duke Energy Carolinas is pushing for a 9.5% hike.
Because someone has to pay for the massive grid expansions required by these new data centers and advanced manufacturing nodes.
Exactly.
The fight is actively on over whether the local ratepayer should foot the bill for big tech's power infrastructure.
And the International Monetary Fund is sounding the alarm on this exact dynamic globally. They're warning that these massive global imbalances are causing severe economic fragmentation.
Basically breaking things apart.
Yeah. The world is fracturing based on who controls technology and investment capital versus who is dependent on imported energy and external financing. That massive global fracture plays out directly on the utility bills of North Carolina residents.
So true.
The data centers pull the power, the grid requires upgrading, and the local household sees their bill jump 9.5%.
So if you're driving to work right now, or sitting at your kitchen table trying to figure out how to pay that utility bill, what is the ultimate takeaway from all of this? The intelligence reports frame this as the capital conversion test.
Yes, the conversion test.
The last 30 days of economic data prove that massive capital formation in regions like the foothills is no longer just a hypothetical PowerPoint slide. It is highly physical. The steel is actively going into the ground.
But the true measure of economic health over the next decade is not going to be how many billions of dollars a governor announces at a ribbon-cutting ceremony.
Right.
The metric that actually matters is whether those billions of dollars can convert into durable economic leverage for the people already living there.
Right, the locals.
Does this capital create local supplier activity? Does it drive real wage growth that outpaces inflation? Does it generate tax capacity that lowers the burden on the resident? Or does it just turn the region into a pass-through infrastructure platform where the wealth is extracted globally while the locals are left paying higher utility bills?
And that is the defining question of the next decade. And it leaves us with one final lingering thought to ponder as we watch this machine operate.
Yeah.
If giants like Prysmian and Microsoft are building the physical backbone of a hyper-automated AI-driven future right in our backyards, we have to ask ourselves something. Is the ultimate goal of these billion-dollar capital investments to eventually uplift the local workforce? Or is the technology they're building designed to eventually make that local workforce obsolete? When the machine of steel, sweat, and debt is finally upgraded, well, will it still need the sweat? Think about that next time you see a ribbon cutting. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.